Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And this week, I apologize for my voice. I'm going to sound stuffed up because I am. I have COVID and I'm trying to fight it off. All that being said, pull up a stump as always, and this story is from Worcester, Massachusetts. So let's jump into that. Thank you for watching.
So a few months ago, I was driving home from Worcester, Massachusetts, and on my way home, I saw one of the most screwed up and bizarre things I have ever witnessed. It was probably around 2 a.m. when it happened. I was in the city with a couple of my friends and my girlfriend. We were at this hookah bar. We were catching up and having a few drinks. Now, this bar closes pretty late, and we didn't get out of there until well after midnight. So after dropping my friends off at home, I brought my girlfriend to her house so she could grab her car. The plan was for her to follow me to my house, and she was going to spend the night. She had work in the morning and needed her car so that she could leave directly from my house and not have to force me into driving her. Now, I was all for this because, to be frank, I'm usually very lonely at night and I enjoy the company of my beautiful girlfriend. It's not too often that I can convince her to sleep over. Now, this was also a very nice night. It was a little on the cold side for July, but crystal clear skies and a perfect, thumbnail moon hanging overhead. I live in the back county of Massachusetts. It was basically all woods, farms, and bumpy, pothole-littered roads. Driving these roads at night can be a little unnerving, but I've become used to it, and I genuinely enjoy a late-night drive through the country. The drive from my girlfriend's house to my house takes about 15 minutes or so. Somehow she managed to get in front of me with her car. It's not that big of a deal because she knows how to get to my house. After all, we've been together for over a year now, so I think nothing of it. I reached into my shirt pocket, I took out my pack of Marlboros and light a cigarette up. Shifting into third gear, I accelerate onto a very pretty stretch of road with farm fields on both sides. Admittedly, I wasn't paying any attention to the road. I know the route to my house like the back of my hand. I look down to ash my cigarette, and upon looking up, there's a deer in the middle of the road. It's a miracle that neither my girlfriend nor I hit it, to be honest. Deer, fox, and raccoons and other critters like that are pretty common on these back roads of New England. So with my heart racing, I let out like a little nervous laugh, imagining the damage that my crummy '94 Ford Escort would sustain if I hit something like that. After driving down this very scenic farm-laden road, our two-car caravan begins the final leg of the drive to my house. This street, Whitewood Road, is very steep and incredibly windy. A few times I've actually almost flipped my car because of my careless driving. Being on the edge of my seat after almost hitting that deer, I made sure to pay attention this time. The taillights of my girlfriend's car ahead of me acted like a marker to follow. I watched them vanish for a second as her car went around a sharp corner, and then to reappear after I had taken the same corner. The road crept through the woods like a snake. At the last bend before the bridge which brings you into a neighborhood, a very secluded one on the outskirts of town, my girlfriend's brake lights went on. She's a really bad driver, to be honest, so I didn't think anything of it. As she took the turn, her high beams illuminated a white shape on the outside corner of the road, just outside of the tree line, right where the white breakdown lane would be if this road had traffic lines. I drove forward, probably at about 10 miles per hour, because the turn was sharp and because I wanted to see what this white shape was. I wish I hadn't. It was a man. He was laying in the fetal position. He was covered in dirt, scraped from head to toe, wearing nothing but a pair of white cut-off shorts, no shoes, and no shirt. His hair was long and jet black and thin. His body was snow white in color. His skin glowed in the yellow hue of my headlights. I stopped my car next to him. My first impression was that it might have been a hitchhiker who was hit by a car, or maybe someone had beaten him up and thrown him out of their vehicle, stranding him alone out here. I used to be an Eagle Scout, and I know a thing or two about first aid. I figured that I could help him, maybe let him use my phone, or even give him a ride. I leaned over into the passenger seat and rolled down the window. The passenger side door was maybe 5 feet away from the man, unlocked. As I rolled down the window, the man looked up at me. His eyes were black as night. The pupils were as big as Oreos. And he didn't blink. He couldn't. He didn't have eyelids. I looked directly into this man's face. He looked crazy and animalistic, like the wilderness had turned him into some kind of beast. After about 10 seconds, the man began to rise to his feet, putting his hands onto his knobby knees for support, his frail chest rising and falling rapidly. He looked me right in the face the whole time, and when he finally got on his feet, he made a move for my door handle. I was frozen with fear, and I didn't know what to do at first. Once I got my senses, I floored it, but the car wouldn't move. I had left it in third gear, and my car, being an absolute piece of shit, just whined and sputtered, and crept forward at about 3 miles per hour. I slipped it back into first gear and took off, all the while keeping my sight fixated on this man. As I drove away, his sunken crazy face turned and gnarled into a grin. I took out my phone and called my girlfriend. Surely she saw this guy. There's no way I just imagined this. My girlfriend answered the phone immediately. I told her to pull over and wait for me. She was about 1,000 feet up the road. I pulled up next to her, my window already about halfway down, and I asked her if she saw the guy. She literally began screaming and crying and took off. She called me and apologized for driving away like that. She said she was too freaked out to sit around in the car that close to the man. I told her to go to our friend's house. He lived in the neighborhood about 10 seconds away from where we pulled over. She agreed and led the way. We got into his house, locked the doors, met up with each other and held hands. Her hand in mine, we ran into his basement. It's always unlocked. Friends just drop by his house all the time. It's just how it's always been. He was sitting in his computer playing WoW when we told him what happened, and he said that he would have to go back and check it out, that there must be an explanation for this. So all three of us piled into my car and began talking about what we saw. My friend wasn't convinced. He's more of a see it to believe it kind of person. We drove down the road where we saw the man. Nothing. We turned around and drove down it again. Nothing. We made a detour, emerging on a side road that leads to the road that we saw this man. We all agreed to make one more pass down the road before calling it a night. Not expecting to see anything, I lit up another cigarette as I was putting my lighter into my pocket. We saw him. He was standing against a tree. No, he was standing facing the tree. His arms were crossed in front of his chest. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't moving. He was just there. My girlfriend began screaming at the top of her lungs. I couldn't take it. It was too much. I just gunned it forward, speeding off down the road. Those horrible screams just echoing in my car. I turned around and said, "Please, shut up." The screams turned to sobs and sporadic sniffles. My friend in front of the passenger seat was awestruck. He couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was so anxious and nervous that I didn't know what to think. And that's when she said it. He had a hammer in his hand. I didn't understand what she was saying through the sobs. She repeated it. He had a hammer in his hand. I decided I had to call the police. I pulled over further up the road and entered 911 into my phone. It was ringing, and I thought, what the hell am I going to tell them? The dispatcher picked up. I told him the story through a very shaky and cracking voice. The dispatch told me to stay put, that they were going to send a patrol car, and that they wanted us to show him where we saw this man. We obeyed and waited for what seemed like an eternity. Every sound that we heard seemed like him. Every movement seemed like it was him. We didn't speak. I just sat there, chain-smoking, and as I lit a cigarette, the officer showed up. I flicked the button to the ground and proceeded to show him where we saw this guy. There was nothing to be found. After waiting around with the cop for a while, answering his repetitive questions, we left. We decided to go to McDonald's for breakfast. It was around 4:30 a.m. now. We made the trip back down Whitewood Road. We passed the spot where we pulled over, the spot where I called the cops from. And then we noticed something. The high beams caught the reflection of an object on the ground. It was the hammer. I stopped the car to look at it. It was most certainly a hammer, and not 3 feet away from it was my barely smoked cigarette. So I don't drive down this road anymore. I can't bear the thought of what might have happened if we sat pulled over on the side of the road for any longer than we did. The police said that they would continue their investigation, but I don't think they'll do anything. Somewhere in the woods of Whitewood Road, there's a man that has no reason being there, and to be honest, I never want to know what he was trying to do. And you can believe me or not, you can say that I just made everything up or whatever, I don't really care, but I promise the image of that man, I call him now, just that grinning will be burned into my mind for the rest of my life.
So, what did you think of that story? Do you think that it was like a black-eyed kid story, or black-eyed adult, I guess, black-eyed person story? Or do you think it was just some guy who was absolutely zoinked out of his mind? Do you think that the person was possessed? Do you think that it was not human at all and just appeared to be one? As always, let me know what you thought down in the comments. And on the topic of black-eyed kids, I'll actually tell you something weird that I remember hearing when I was a kid. So in my community area type place, there's a lot of hunters, as there tends to be in very rural areas like this. And I remember overhearing every now and then, you'd hear a story about a hunter had seen somebody with black eyes in the woods, and then another hunter would be like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy too, or I've seen those kids too. And it actually wasn't until, like, I'm gonna be honest, the past like couple years that I've started hearing about black-eyed kids. And it makes me wonder if they, I don't know, crazy thought, but do they have like their own societies where some of them are feral and some of them aren't? I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here. I did read somewhere, though, that if your property or house is blessed or whatever, then they won't bother you or they can't go there. So I guess that's something everybody can do, is get your stuff blessed if you don't want the old black-eyed kid showing up at your doorstep at 2 a.m. But yeah, I could go on and on and on about black-eyed kids and compulsion and all that stuff that people feel when they look at them and how it's like demon magic and stuff. But anyways, I will leave you with that. And hopefully this next week the upload schedule will be normal again. And yeah, thank you for pulling up a stump. Especially thank you for listening to me ramble for the past 2 minutes. And if you want to support the channel, there are links in the description below. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.